If I was a bookmaker, I would not want to have to set strikeout props on pitchers, and here's why.
This is Sharp Money with Patrick Meagher on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
As we welcome in Steve Fezzik, unfortunately, a good friend of his, Richie Buer, has passed away at the age of 80. Now, he was a famous college football expert, and he was a long staple in the Tuesday group. And Steve, we can stretch out a little bit here and talk about your buddy Richie, and welcome to the program.
Yeah, and I'd like to say he was a good friend, but, frankly, more just a friend. I never really got to know Richie well enough, but a guy I absolutely respected deeply. And during our Tuesday group meetings, and Richie I think he was like a plumber and pipe fitter in a previous year back in, I believe, Pennsylvania, but moved out to Vegas. He and his brother Tom were always staples of the Tuesday group. Joe Fortenbaugh attended some of these meetings. We had like Brian Leonard, Teddy Covers, like 15, 20 people. They even made a movie about the Tuesday group was part of that called Life on the Line. But Richie was the college football expert, and we would start with each game on the rotations, and he'd go, okay, game 104, game 101, 102, Notre Dame's laying 6 to Michigan. I make it 4. And I think that this is too high. You have to take the dog in this series. And so he was like the gospel for everybody. You did not want to go against Richie and his numbers. And my favorite saying Richie used to say, someone would complain, and they'd go like, well, now, wait a minute. LSU has a really, really good offense. And he'd go, that was last year. It's like, don't fall in love with what you saw last year. Things change in college football.
Love to hear that. And again, Life on the Line. I enjoyed that thoroughly. R.I.P. Richie Buer passes away at the age of 80. Now let's think about more and dig into those Tuesday meetings and the Tuesday groups. Is there anything in particular, not just from Richie, but being amongst the group tank and the smart guys that you took away from that?
Yes, you can learn a lot from everyone. You just have to have your ears open. Even non-bettors, when you hear them talk, that can be very, very a good thing for your betting. We had one guy from Buffalo. Glenn was from Buffalo, and I don't think any of us would have said that Glenn was a professional bettor or a guy that we'd fear, booking his action. But he would say things like, whenever Buffalo plays Miami, that's the most important game of the year for the Bills. Not as important for Miami. And then you looked at it, and year after year, the Buffalo Bills, this was back when they were bad, they would have great efforts against the Miami Dolphins. For whatever reason, I guess living in Buffalo where, you got the eclipse going for you today. But aside from that, not much weather-wise in Buffalo versus Miami. Yes.
I think you said something very important, and I've watched it kill a bunch of very young, talented broadcasters as well. We have 2 ears and one mouth for a reason, and listening is a skill. But oftentimes, we're just so concerned about what we have to say next, and if you just slow down a little bit and listen, and like you just said, I think that's such an important point. It's not even the sharp guys. It's just getting information even from people that you wouldn't mind booking it, but maybe you can pick up something that the quote-unquote public is thinking. I think that's a great point about listening and absorbing the information, Steve.
Yeah, and I fall victim to this. I remember back when I was on national radio, I'd always be looking for the gold star. I'd be thinking about, okay, what's my next point going to be? And I want to sound clever and the like. And I wasn't actively listening enough to what someone was saying. So I can't tell you how many times I'll be listening to a show and someone will say something that just needs to be addressed. And the person is so, or someone's interviewing a player on the sideline, but they're so focused on what their next question or comment's going to be that they don't follow up on something poignant that the person has just said.
I feel like I'm being attacked here.
It's good. No, you're not. The great interviewers, and you can think of interviewers that you've enjoyed in the past, what they do exactly what Steve just said. They have a game plan going into it, but what they do is they're listening so intently that they pick up on what's being said and they build off that, and that turns into a more organic conversation. Dustin, nobody's attacking you.
Just making sure.
Nobody's attacking. RIP to Richie.
The mere fact that Dustin commented on my last comment shows that he's actively listening. See?
I'm usually
that was tremendous. I like how you did that, Steve.
I'm usually just teeing up my next thing. I'm just playing off of it.
And the difference when we met, I don't know how many years ago now, you would just stare at me blankly, and you'd be like, "You done yet?" And then you'd find, now we're just having a conversation, big guy. You're doing a great job. I love it.
And pursuant to that, Patrick, and the number one thing that I cannot stand is the fake experts, the content providers, who they'll ask someone a question and the person will answer it, and literally they'll be, "Well, that's a really good point you made. Let me move on to my next." They never follow up on it, and there's a lot of meat on the bone sometimes. Yes.
Let me follow up there. No, I'm just playing.
That's why we do an hour with Fezzik, because we can follow up a lot.
Yeah, trust me, I fall into these traps as well. You'll notice oftentimes, like you said, with content providers, they'll answer their own question that they're asking an expert because they want to prove their worth to the expert. And so you kind of get caught in this circle, right, Steve, where I'm sure you've been on many, many shows where you're interviewed and you're like, well, do I even need to answer that? Because you just told me what you think about the answer in the question.
And to throw myself under the bus, I think last week we were talking about Crosby, Stills, and Nash. There was a reference to that, and I was so proud. Oh, I've got a reference when they're appearing in a Beatles video, or in a Dylan video, and I was like, oh, look at me. I'm a big man. I know something about rock and roll, which the truth is I know almost nothing. And see, I fell into that I was a victim of that last week.
Well, he's going to break out like grease. He's going to break out the comb out of the back of his. And he's the bad boy. Now, I've got a couple of things. I don't know if you saw Jonathan on his way out, Steve, but he looks like a different human being with this weight loss journey. Dustin, of course, has lost a ton of weight. But I think you're embarrassing the both of them because, Dustin, are you nervous right now sitting next to those guns?
I know.
My gosh, Fezzik, what is happening with you and getting it you are going to the gym a lot, it appears.
Are you
this guy?
Are you on the Frank Thomas plan? The Barry Bonds plan? What are you on?
Is that Nugenics? Is your wife okay? She must be all over you.
They got to just get rid of that St. Louis car. Andy Van Slyke, they need to let him go because that Nugenics is not working for Van Slyke.
Wrong endorser. Wrong endorser.
Spot on. No, I'm doing the best I can. I don't want to get JVT angry at me, but there is a rumor. There's an undisclosed rumor that JVT was spotted the day before the first weigh-in at the Caesars Bacchanal Buffet, loading up to get up to 300 pounds.
Look, we know he skewed the numbers. That's fine.
Sure.
Here's the thing. When you do the right thing, you just have to believe the world. Karma works out. So I'm going about it the right way, and therefore, in the end, I know I'll be victorious. He can play his little games of beating that number to a point where he inflated it during the first weigh, and he was holding 25-pound weights. I think he had his kid on his shoulders, and that's why he weighed in at 300 pounds.
Speaking of sandbagging, I'm all over the place, Patrick. You know how this goes. I still Aaron Rodgers won. He has his. I was at Pebble Beach, and his plaque is their Pro-Am winner. Aaron Rodgers, best sandbagger cheater in golf. And it's if you're as accomplished as Aaron Rodgers, why do you need to cheat at golf and say you're a 10 handicap or whatever when you're almost a scratch golfer? It's just not right.
Oh, it's been proven. He outwardly lies about his handicap. He is diabolical.
I wouldn't say anything. He's about to be vice president.
I would like to see it.
Okay.
There's a rumor that Donald Trump is going to be paired with him so that they're two handicaps because Trump says he shoots 67, and Aaron Rodgers says he shoots 80, so they'll offset and they'll be perfect match.
I was watching a couple of weeks ago. I was watching a great documentary on Las Vegas and the mob. Ooh. And they started talking about Las Vegas and the mob centered around the Tropicana. And the Tropicana, I believe, is officially getting blown up or rebranded. Can you help us understand?
Yeah, so the Trop, which has been around for 60-plus years, and I have to tell you, it was the go-to spot. I remember going like in the late 80s, early 90s when I was a young man, and they had a pool with like cascading waterfalls. They had exotic birds, not just out by the pool, but in the hallway as you walked to the pool, and it was the place to be. There was blackjack in the pool. I know Caesars does that. A few other places do it, but I think the Trop was the first place to do it. That was a joint. That was really a great place for a young person to have an awesome Vegas experience.
Are they imploding? What are they doing with the actual structure?
Well, apparently we're going to have a baseball stadium there in 4 years. Now, last time I checked, they were able to build one story in a day and the Empire State Building in a year. How can you build a 100-story building in 1931 or whatever it was in a year, but it takes us 3.5 years to demolish a building? I guess there's a lot of asbestos that's in the roof.
Well, they found a lot. I saw a report that a lot of asbestos was found in the Trop.
but even
don't worry, because baseball's going to take care of it, Steve, because they're going to move the A's to Sacramento and play in front of 10,000 fans in the meantime. So baseball's got it covered.
Good seats available.
About that. Great seats available. Steve Fezzik, professional bettor, hanging out. Also, professional weightlifter, it appears. We give him credit for that. Hanging out with Dustin Swedelson, who also is killing it with the weight loss journey. I'm Patrick Maher as we got you back here. Sharp Money, presented by DraftKings. So I told Dustin, Mr. Fezzik, that I didn't have anything on the game, Iowa and South Carolina, but I threw on the first quarter yesterday, and as you know, it's beautiful here in California, so I was about to walk the dog, and I ended up watching the whole entire game. What stood out to me, and I know you have a take on the women's game, what stood out to me was I was fascinated Iowa was even in that game because South Carolina was head and shoulders so much better just on the wood. It was fascinating, but I have to admit, I got wrapped up in it.
Yeah, and and from a betting perspective, if you watch that game and you were live betting, I'm going to make the case you won because I don't think you could have watched it and not said, oh my goodness, Iowa has the lead, but South Carolina clearly has the athletes and the horses, and they're so much deeper. And certainly Iowa, the gals looked to get a little gassed. Even Clark seemed a little bit gassed. And at the end of the first quarter, late in the first quarter, you could play the game at Pick'em. I actually gave that out to my clients live. It's very rare. And I'm like, South Carolina's going to win this game. I mean, it's one of those always easy after the fact. But because I did give it out, and I've got a group text I give it to a bunch of people, that if they played that again at that situation, my goodness, that was one of the best bets of the year. I really think these teams, if they played over and over 10 times, South Carolina would win 9 of the 10. And I think I'm being a little bit kind, actually. That
I think so too.
Right? I mean, there's not the only path is for Iowa to make all those threes. That's the only path.
I was watching it. It was shocking. The only comparison I could come up with in a championship game, Steve, and you'll remember this, I'm sure you bet on it, was the Chargers and 49ers Super Bowl, with Bobby Ross. And you remember that Super Bowl where I think the number was 14.5?
Natrone Means was the running back. I remember that.
Stan Humphries. It was Steve Young was the quarterback for the four. Like that game, we could tell going into it was lopsided. The talent disparity with South Carolina, their freshmen were better than the team that Iowa had on the court.
It might have been 18. It was that was the year, of course, that I think San Diego was catching almost double digits at the Pittsburgh
29?
Steelers, who weren't even any good.
You said Chargers Niners, right?
Yeah, yes, because the point spread was in place, so the Niners won by 23. But I remember the TV cutaway of the Chargers had scored. They would have covered the point spread.
Yeah.
But I still remember the announcer of the Chargers because it was unlikely. It was a huge upset. They got there. That the lightning bolt has done it. They've headed to Pittsburgh and they've upset the Steelers, and they're going to make the lightning bolt's going to make the right hand turn to Miami and play the 49ers. What was the tight end there? They had a Tapupolo?
Tuasosopa, something like that. Yeah. It was, by the way, 18
I want to say it was like
Patuno? I don't know.
Maybe it was 04, 05. One of the two.
It's a great example, Patrick, as far as, like, you say they could play like 10 times, and 10 times the Niners were going to win. However, let me use an example of something. I like to say 9 out of 10, not 10 out of 10. You know why? If they went back and replayed that Villanova-Georgetown final, 10 times, I don't think Villanova wins once. They literally have to make every one of these 21-foot shots that count for 2 points, but they did. So things happen.
That's a good one. That's a tremendous comparison. And we'll save for the next segment tonight's game, and we'll talk about UConn being a 6.5, 7-point favorite. Let's go here. Baseball prop to focus on, in your opinion, and that baseball prop is what?
You know, I really think the pitcher strikeout prop, because I spoke about how the Nerfy is too easy to price, and there's too much vig, and it's too hard to win. But I'm thinking to myself, if I was a bookmaker, I would not want to have to set strikeout props on pitchers, and here's why. Think about all the things that can go wrong. Will Smith brought this up. Will Hill brought this up to me. He's like, whenever there's crappy weather forecast, like early in the game, third or fourth inning, all you need is a rain delay, and it's going to be really hard for a pitcher, the starter, to get that many innings, because oftentimes if he's only pitched like 4 innings and they go into a rain delay, that might be it for him, and he's not going to get to his strikeout amount. Also, word's going to come out, there's a pitch restriction on a pitcher. So there are some tremendous unders that you can find, I think, if you just are patient and wait for those perfect circumstances.
Good one. How's the early baseball season been playing out for you thus far?
I think I'm up like a unit. I mean, I've really been pretty much chopping. I want to give accolades, so in terms of props, the MGM was putting up props on number of pitches that are going to be thrown like in a half inning in the first inning, which, talk about a really difficult prop to price, and accolades to, Jared Smith's been killing that, looking at that specific prop, and where I give him the most accolade is you want to find a prop that's really difficult to set lines. I don't know, 15.5. It's not easy to price these sort of things, and those are the things as a smaller bettor. If you're just betting $300 or $500, don't try to pick the winner of tonight's game. The line's 7, and you know what? I bet minus 6.5, minus 105 about an hour ago, and I bet plus 7.5, lay $1.10 40 minutes ago. I like both bets.
See, so I like what Steve's saying here, Patrick, because a problem I'm having is my handicap is right and the bet is wrong. I had it Friday with a game I thought the A's were live as an underdog. I went first 5 plus a half run. They don't cover that. They do cover the full game plus 1.5, plus 105. Yesterday, I had Giants first 5. There was an opportunity to bet them. If I went first 7, I think they would have won, but full game, they end up winning outright. I keep having the right handicap, but following it with the wrong bet. That's been a struggle.
But directionally, I like what you're doing a lot because you would never trust the Oakland A's team for 9 innings. So if they have their Blackbeard, Blackburn guy pitching, they should trade him to the Pirates. He can change his name to Blackbeard. And he's been tremendous so far this year. Well, first 5, that's a good pitcher to back. But you really want to trust these Oakland A's, especially at home where the Boo Birds, there aren't enough fans in the stands to boo. It's just apathy, Patrick. What if you were the commissioner? Could you fix this problem with the A's? I couldn't.
No, they've botched it, and the owner with the A's is such a shady person as well. But I also do believe, in a way, that Vegas has botched this because, like you said, stadium could get built. But I think there's some political wrangling and some political positioning going around in Vegas that is delaying this for another 3 years as well. You guys are closer to the source, so maybe you can speak on that.
I think it's intentional. I don't know anything. I've followed it loosely. I think there's an intentional plan to look at it and have so much drama go on so long and say, you know what, Sacramento, Salt Lake, the A's are yours. We'll wait for our expansion team. Because I think part of the reason the Raiders aren't working, Bay Area reject here, and the reason the Knights are working is because they were born here, Vegas born. I think Vegas wants their own team expansion-wise because they already know they're going to get an NBA team.
It's interesting, though, but we stole Oakland's football team, and that's worked out swimmingly by all accounts. So why not just, poach Oakland in general? Now, our mayor, she has her heart in the right place, Carol Goodman. She wants the stadium to be downtown and for there to be more economic advancement of that area of town. But she's just wrong. because Cashman Field was basically in a slum where our AAA ballpark used to be, and it was never well attended. And then they moved it to Summerlin, and it was fantastic. And everyone loves, that experience. And people will, if you put a 25,000 seat stadium at Tropicana, we'll be able to fill it, and tourists will come. They're not going to come to go to, a north of downtown venue or an area that's not nearly as nice.
I'd argue, though, baseball needs the local support. That's the only thing I'd argue with that, is that baseball needs the fans that are going to show up for half of those home games or half of those games that are at home. I think the Strip's going to be hard to get to. You do something like Atlanta did. You build it in the suburbs. You don't get the tourists, but you get the support of the community.
Yeah, but the Golden Knights are right on the Strip, and people talk about what a pain it is, and there's shuttle buses all over the place. Heck, I ran into Negreanu, shuttling over from the Bellagio to that monorail that runs to the Monte Carlo.
Poker tournaments. The number one mistake you see people making when they approach the bubble.
Yeah, so the books say when the bubble approaches, everyone gets too wussy and wimpy, and that's the time to accumulate lots of chips. But people aren't reading closely enough. That's true if you're a big stack. If you're a fat stack, feast on the mid-range stacks and grow your stack size. But I see the opposite. I see, frankly, a donk fest where the cars running outside, and they want to bust out of this tournament. And they've read not enough books. Negreanu or someone told them, be ultra aggressive come bubble time. So they're being ridiculously aggressive with a mid-size stack with crap. So it's one thing to be shoving with like 20 big blinds with ace-jack. I see this all the time. I'll see another mid-size stack call with pocket threes. Think about this. Your pocket threes are never going to be ahead of anything. At best, you're racing. A lot of times you are racing against two bigger cards. But you could be dominated. The other guy could have pocket nines. So the bottom line is the biggest mistake I see, people calling all-ins that are mid-stacks with hands that are not ace-king. Hands that are much more like ace-10 or pocket fours. That's just not good enough. You know what? Play ultra tight if you're calling any all-in when you have a mid-stack as the bubble approaches.
I know Negreanu's still out there. Can you walk around town and sit down at a game and still see Phil Ivey?
I have not seen Phil Ivey in forever. I don't believe he can play in the World Series because he lost that settlement. And if he won like $3 million, I think it would get confiscated. I'm not 100% certain.
Speaking of the Borgata, I believe that's where the drama went down with Mr. Ivey over at the Borgata. Steve, tremendous. We covered everything. You're the best. Professional bettor. Pregame.com. Fezzik Sports on Twitter. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Phil Ivey's great.